Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson, an adoptive mom of a 19-year-old son, Joey, who is in recovery from addiction and who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest, I'm very excited to let you know, is Sandy Whitehawk, a Minnesota-based Lakota adoptee who was adopted from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota by white missionaries. She grew up in Wisconsin and suffered horrendous abuse and alienation from her heritage. As an adult, she returned home to her reservation in 1988, which began her long spiritual quest to unite other fostered and adopted people with their lineage. In 2000, she formed First Nations Orphans Association, which is now called First Nations Repatriation Institute, an organization that helps restore First Nations people to their homelands. Sandy is now the Director of Healing Programs at the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, and she's the former Elder in Residence at the Indian Child Welfare Law Office in Minneapolis, and she has received many awards for her tireless advocacy. She's the subject of 3 documentaries, which I will list in the show notes, and she has recently published a wonderful book about her life called A Child of the Indian Race, A Story of Return, which I've just read and highly recommend to you all to read. I am so honored to have you here on Unraveling Adoption, Sandy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation, Beth. I'm really happy to be here. And hello to everyone out there in, is it a cyber world, a podcast world? That's it.
Yeah, it's all over the universe, wherever it goes. I don't know. I just admire all the work you've done and continue to do. And I am just sickened by the atrocities that we white people and the government and the religious organizations have perpetrated upon Native Americans in the US and Canada. And it seems like every day I'm hearing more stories and terrible things that we've done. And it's literally stealing children for white people to adopt and foster, to erase Native lineages. And it's just horrible. And I really want everyone to understand this topic more deeply. So I'm grateful that you're willing to expend your emotional energy to help us today, and your time too, of course. So for those of you who haven't read your memoir yet, can you just give us a brief glimpse into your childhood as a transracial adoptee?
Sure. I was adopted at 18 months old, and for so many years, I didn't realize the little blips that would come into my mind about this little girl being lifted into a truck between 2 people she didn't know. And then I also didn't realize it was the first time I disassociated because there was a little girl watching the girl in the front. So I was so terrified that I literally left my body and went into the bed of the truck, looked through the back window.
Wow.
So that blip would come throughout my life. And the next blip that would come is hiding from my adoptive mother, hiding under the kitchen table, hiding from her. And then because of her not being well and healthy, she put all that on me, that there was something wrong with me. So here I was, a child at 18 months old who had a family, who was already attached, who already had a familiarity, and just being taken. And then the next day, there I am. So I was just absolutely terrified. And I was never comforted about that. In fact, I was always told, you were a nervous wreck when we got you, and blamed it all on where I came from, my family.
Oh, like they rescued you and you were nervous, but then you came to them and then you were fine. Like that.
Yeah, except that I wasn't. And I was a mess. That one, my father, on the other hand, I have really wonderful memories of him. And he died when I was 6. And it just got worse because now that I look back on it with more understanding and wisdom, or just plain knowledge, my adoptive mom, something was wrong. I know that she took mood stabilizing drugs because the only reason I know this is when I started drinking in high school and started doing drugs, a group of us used to steal drugs from our parents' medicine cabinets.
Sure.
We'd get them and bring them back and look at them and say, okay, because back then in the late 60s, early 70s, they just handed out Valium and speed to moms. It was crazy. And so
Wow.
in a way, you know, it was what's really kind of sad, but yet also I was protected because we didn't take at that time street drugs. We took pharmaceuticals or straight from the very,
Took your parents' drugs. Okay.
very pure.
Oh, yeah,
But
right.
anyway, I remember bringing lithium and they were like, what's this? I go, I don't know.
So she might have had bipolar, huh?
Yeah. So somehow we looked it up. But anyway, so it still didn't mean a whole lot to me. It just meant, you know, because I was a young person. And then being the only brown girl in the town that I grew up in was difficult.
Yeah.
And as an adoptee, we live in emotional isolation because everything around us, if we're in a family where there are other bio children, that adds a barrier that we never can enter. That's very clear to us. We don't have a language for it. We just know that it's there. And depending on how healthy or unhealthy the family is, will determine your isolation, is how I see it. So anyway, I went through a lot of that. The physical abuse, the emotional abuse. Yeah, that was just hard. And I faked it. I just watched people around me. And my husband to this day always says, you are really, because I can do it in anything. I can fake
a chameleon,
anything.
Yeah.
Even, okay, so I got health issues and I can say, no, I'm okay when I know I'm not okay. I can say, no, I'm good. I'm okay. And he'll look at me and he'll say, are you trying to bamboozle me? Because I don't know. You don't look like you're okay.
He's got your number.
He does. He could tell. So that skill I learned, you know, I still do it from time to time. But so it was really difficult. And my early life was, I was just your typical person that comes out of a toxic situation, as I always found toxic people. Uncanny how that happens, right down to almost the word choices of berating. You know, how would they know to say that when my mom said that? And as I began to heal, I started understanding, you know, the real common denominator was me.
And you're just looking for what you know, which is being abused. And you just kept finding that. I know. I watched my son doing something similar. It's like, oh, it's so hard. It's so hard to watch. And I've done the same thing too. I'm on my third marriage.
They're literally neural pathway into our brain. And until we can heal that, we're going to continue to repeat that. So life was really a challenge. I didn't meet any Indian people till I went home in 1988. So I didn't know what a reservation, I knew nothing. I knew nothing.
Now in Wisconsin, there's got to be reservations, but your parents just didn't expose you.
11 tribes.
Wow.
11 tribes. I grew up 30 miles from the Ho-Chunk Nation.
Oh, so you could have, even though it wasn't your tribe, you could have, if your parents would have been willing, you could have connected at least to other Native Americans. Or gone to powwows or whatever.
Anything,
But they didn't want you to even think of yourself as Indian, right?
Yeah, she did not want me to. She'd always tell me I don't look Indian. I don't know why they're picking on you, you know, and she'd say, your hair's not even black. And I'd look in the mirror and go, this is brown? This looks black. You know, if you see any old pictures of me, I had black hair, you know.
Oh my gosh. Your mom was in so much denial or something. What was that? She just wanted you to be hers or something.
She was ignorant. And I don't mean that in a judgmental sense. I mean that in the sense of what ignorance is, right?
She just didn't
She
know.
was ignorant and arrogant at the same time.
Bad combo.
Yeah. That's why I think she could, you know, well, we are Christians and we know better. And you poor Indians, it was pretty sick.
Yeah. Oh, it's so terrible. It's just so painful reading your story and just realizing how much religion is wrapped into this whole thing. And, oh, it's really ugly. It's just, it's really terrible.
My niece was reading the book for the first time and she goes, oh man, I'm on the 3rd chapter and yeah, this is really sad. And I go, keep reading. It gets better. It does get better.
It does. You have a nice arc to your story and you get to the other side, you know, not that it's ever, you know, removed your trauma, but you are into the place now where you're transforming other people's lives because you've transformed your own and you're helping so many other people. So that's amazing.
Yeah. So it's a warning. If anybody out there buys the book, remember the first 3 are kind of sad. Yeah, they are sad.
Yeah. Keep going. Keep going. It gets better. And you'll find maybe inspiration to help other people yourselves, right?
Yeah.
Your story is very inspiring. Now, I want to ask you about your adoption itself, I know adoption is like a lifelong thing, but when you got adopted, do you know what was going on with your birth parents? Would there have been other people that could have taken care of you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were stolen, right?
Yes.
Was that
So
what you
this, I
consider it?
call it, yeah. The second time I went home, I was able to stay for a week. First time I met everybody was like 2 days, one sort of full day, and then maybe half a day coming back from Colorado.
Yeah.
So then that second time I went home, I got to stay there for a week. I stayed with my aunt. So I was meeting different relatives, and I remember they said, well, you got to go down to Ghost Talk Park because that's where Doris Fallis is. And I'm like, I have no idea who, they would just say names. I'm like, And they said, yeah, she's your mom's cousin. She was close to your mom and blah, blah, blah. So we went down there and I walked up to her. I walked slower than the person, I think it was my cousin, got up to her really right quickly to say who I was. And I kind of stayed back. And when she got done telling her, she looked up and looked over at me. And I remember her going, so she comes and I wish I could find this picture because there's a picture of me walking with her and she put my arm in her arm and was patting my hand. And she was really happy, to see me because she said she had taken care of me while my mom was on her adventures, she called it. And I said, oh, that's nice to call it that, but it's okay. I said, I'm a recovering alcoholic myself. So I don't have any judgment, any anger, anything. I just want to meet my family. And she goes, yes, I would take care of you. And then she kept looking at me. And that's when she said, you were blonde when you were a baby. And I'm like, blonde?
Oh, my gosh.
That made me laugh. And then later on, through my uncle, I found out we had a lot of blonde relatives in our family. And my other uncle had said that the reason that was because French fur trapper blood. So anyway, so in our family, we got blue eyes will pop up, light brown hair, blonde. I mean, it's just kind of a pretty rainbow of color of us.
Yeah.
And anyway, I used to go see her periodically, this Doris, and I found out that she really, in the double digits, up high, 30-ish, she was the auntie that took care of everybody.
Okay. So she would have taken you.
She would have kept me. She told me that. She said, I couldn't because the law at that time wouldn't allow children to stay the way, like today you can stay with your relatives. So that couldn't be. So I don't know if we were at her house on the day I was taken. I never did confirm that. I forgot to ask whose house was I at? Because the story I was told is that they were sitting outside the house just during the day and a white social worker drove up, got out of the car, saw me, grabbed me, put me in the car. And I couldn't imagine how my uncles felt on that day. They couldn't even protect their little baby, their little niece, because had they done anything, they would have been arrested, put in jail.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I would have still been gone, regardless. God. So there's that. So when we're taken, regardless of how we're taken, it doesn't matter. It still impacts the family deeply.
Yes. Your book and your ceremonies that you do really go into that. Like all these people, aunts and cousins and siblings who have missed a person at the table their whole life that just was absent because of this atrocity that happened to your families. And it's not just the adoptee, although certainly that's where probably the most pain is, but everybody around that lost you is also very affected. It's just
so when we come back, we mirror that pain.
Tell me more about that.
So they probably didn't talk about that story until I came home. Because how painful that would be.
Yes. Just no control. They had no idea if or when you'd ever come back. So probably just shut it and don't talk about it. Is that what they did?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the two people that carry the most pain are the birth mother and the adoptee.
Yes.
Today, she provides the commodity. And then baby is there for somebody else. We don't hear anything about birth mothers. So we're doing our first study on Indian birth mothers. There's some studies done on birth mothers, but nothing on Native American birth moms.
Okay.
And so I'm wanting to do that. And boy, the stories I'm starting to hear are just horrendous.
Oh, I bet.
Just horrendous. But anyway, just meeting the different relatives who saw me, who took care of me. You'd think in 18 months you wouldn't have a lot of story to tell. But I was really surprised. Everybody had a story because they had interacted with me. How would you not have some
Sure.
sort of thing? And I remember on that second trip home, staying with my aunt there at the same time, an uncle came home for the powwow who lived in Texas. And we were visiting, and he says, "Yeah, I remember you. I remember you." And I said, "Oh, do you?" And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "I always would get stuck taking care of the little kids." And I said, "Oh, did you?" And he goes, "So you had to take care of me?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "I took care of," and then he says a number, I can't remember what it is, but like all the kids my age. And I said, "Oh man, so you saw me when I was a baby and took care of me?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Was I a cute baby?" And he goes, "No, you was ugly." And we just laughed. It made me just laugh. And it just gave me that sense of belonging that, that we could
Oh,
tease in that way. Because that's
oh.
an art form that we have as Indian people. It's very healing, and we always say if someone isn't teasing you or you're not
Oh.
laughing with them, they don't like you.
Oh, so teasing is a form of
An
endearment.
affection. Yep. It's affection.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, good to
Yeah.
know.
Yes. So anyway, yeah, there's a few other stories, but we should probably talk about some other stuff here. But it's just incredible. And I don't know, somewhere along the line in adoption, in those early days of it forming here, this idea of a child should be taken out of poverty and put in a nicer, more money place, that they're going to thrive and be okay. Like, and we are still in that thought process. I mean, that
Yeah.
women are still told that when they go to a crisis pregnancy center, your child deserves two parents, your child deserves whatever. Now that's not as intense that single moms can adopt, but I mean, still, it's, of course, you are giving your child the best. This is the best, on and on, and totally ignoring what we know. Well, I think it's getting out more and more, but what the real mental health outcome is for
Oh.
adoption.
Oh, it's so terrible. And if the biggest crime is poverty, well, criminy, it's just horrible. It's so classist and white supremacist, and just to it just I
Mm-hmm.
it just makes me so mad sometimes. And that's why I'm just trying to get the word out to people. And I hope that people listen to this podcast that are not even related to adoption,
Mm-hmm.
that can get their eyes opened a little bit, go, "Oh, I thought adoption was good. What the heck?" So I know it's shocking for people to realize. I remember when I realized, I was like, "Oh my God, what did I do?" But if we can all just put ourselves in the adoptees' shoes for just a moment, I think that would help a lot.
Yeah.
I know it's impossible to put into words, but can you describe to us what it was like when you finally got to reconnect with your family? How old were you at that time? You were
36.
And you probably had maybe thought you would never meet them at a certain point, or did you always know you would find your way back?
No, I never even thought that was a possibility. That was just something I didn't even think about. I don't know that there are any words to describe what it's like to look into the face of my brother. That was when I very first felt like I saw my own face. And I'll just never forget how he just smiled big at me. And he said, "Hello, sister." And I said hello, and we didn't say anything. We just looked at each other. And I watched a few adoptees reconnect, and that's what we do, is just stare, because we have missed that developmental stage of the mirroring that we get with our parents and our family. Because think about that time when children are babies, you hold them up and you look at them and look at them and look at them. And eventually, as we get bigger, we realize we don't look like anybody.
Yeah. And you just are like, "I'm all by myself."
And it is a horrible, horrible feeling that I haven't figured out adequate words for that either, other than I could still see times looking in the mirror and just going, "What the fuck?" You literally, most adoptees that I've spoke to when we've talked about this issue, we conclude that we're pretty ugly because we have nothing that resembles us. We try. I tried really hard to fit in. I tried so hard. And I used to always say I was the best white girl around until someone would remind me I wasn't.
So you tried to dress the part, you mean, like
everything. Yeah, the dress the part, look the part, talk like the part. The only thing I didn't do was spend a lot of time in the mirror, like a lot of because I couldn't look at myself.
So Did that part get healed when you were able to see people that mirrored you? Were you able to fully accept yourself better?
It came
in your
over
skin?
time.
Yeah.
It came over
Yeah.
time.
I bet that took time.
And it blew me away when I would go to powwows or go places where there were Indians, like at a Walmart, because like I'd be at a border town or whatever, and the Indian people would see me as Indian. That blew me
Oh.
away. I was like, whoa.
And would they try to talk to you and you'd be like, I don't understand, you know?
Yeah. Well, I just was always shocked that they saw that. And I would engage at that point. But there was an adoptee who couldn't figure out why Indians would talk to him too. He goes, yeah, they were always really friendly. I couldn't figure that out. And it was because he was
Oh my
Indian.
gosh.
And so it's just kind of funny that, but that's another part that's so hard. So that's why in adolescence is the time that adoptees really have a difficult time, because we're maturing but we're not maturing into anything around us.
Yeah. And you're trying to figure out who you are. That's when my son had trouble for sure. Like 13, 14. Yeah.
We've spent a lifetime up until that point, and then it continues.
Yeah.
No one ever tells us that we laugh like our uncle, that we think like our cousin. No one ever, and our toes don't look like anybody's, our fingers are nothing. So add another layer of isolation. Yeah. So I was blown away the first time that I was babbling away. I'm ADD, and I just can sometimes, especially when I get excited, I can't stop talking. I just talk. So every time I went home, I would be filled in that kind of energy. And old school Indian folks are slower in the way that they speak, and it's very rude to interject, and you wait. It's just all slower. So I'm just going on and on and on. And one of my uncles says to the other one, is they start talking in Indian to each other. And I'm like, what? And they looked at me and they go, well, all we're saying is like, you remind us of your Aunt Gladys. And I go, oh, really? How's that? And they go, she's really spacey. Goes on. I'm like, okay, cool. So
that kind of comes.
So it was, again, gave me a sense of belonging, or that, yes, this is where I'm from. But and so we spend a lifetime never hearing things like that.
Maybe that's where you got the ADD from.
Probably. I'm thinking, oh, she must be ADD.
And I thought it was fascinating that you, who grew up in white culture, that you had to kind of relearn your own culture when you got reunited, and that there is a big difference. And that must have been really difficult for everyone. I think it must be difficult for your family, your birth family, because they want to welcome you, but you're rude. But you don't know you're rude. But gosh, that must take some delicate conversations. How did y'all learn that?
Especially because you don't know you're being rude.
Yeah. How do you know?
My sister-in-law was really helpful. Big time.
Sat you down and...
Just said, okay. She would like nudge me if we were someplace. She'd go like that. I'd be like, okay. I had no idea what's going on, but I'd be quiet then,
Like, it's not your time to talk.
But it was, it was so healing, because pretending and living in white world is intense, competitive. It's mean. It's not compassionate. So it was really easy to shed it when it was pointed out to me. I was like, oh, that's that. I can let that go. Oh my God, yes.
Oh, it's like shedding skin. Nice.
Oh, it was awesome.
Oh my gosh.
It was awesome. And then once I started doing that, the natural me came out. Who I was meant to be comes out.
Yeah. I wonder if you had never reunited, you would never have known who you really were.
Exactly.
You're just a mask the whole time. Wow. Now, has your mother passed, or did you?
Yes, she had passed 2 years before I made it home.
Your birth mother had passed.
My birth mother had passed.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. Was your adoptive mother on board with this then? I'm going to guess not.
Oh, I would never talk to her about anything like that.
Okay. Were you even in touch with her at that point?
I think so. I never discussed it with her. There was a time period where I had said, I can't speak to you, because I was noticing how every time I was around her, how I would just emotionally collapse inside. I couldn't function around her. And I went, okay, this is about me, not her. So I need to take care of me. I can change me, So I just told her, I said, I can't speak with you for a while.
Yeah.
And oh my God, that felt so good. And it felt good to do it calmly.
Mhm.
I've thought this through. I know what I'm doing, and just respectfully say it. And I just left it there.
Okay.
And I thought, well, when I'm strong enough, I'll just reconnect. Not out of love, because there wasn't any there.
Yeah, right. I bet.
There wasn't any there.
Maybe out of duty?
Out of obligation.
Yeah.
Obligation. Because so much had happened between us. There wasn't anything to enjoy in her personality and the way she lived her life even.
Wow.
It was just, that's what it was. And so I would never have spoken to her about going home. No way in hell. Anyway.
Yeah.
So she passed before I got well enough to see her. I opted, I think I put that in the book, where I opted not to go see her when she was dying.
I don't blame you at all. Oh, it's just heartbreaking that you had to deal with all of that. But I'm glad you were able to, and that came from recovering from substances. I bet that growth, taking care of yourself and.
Right. I was blessed to have a really incredibly healthy 12-step clubhouse I used to go to.
Nice.
2 times a day if I had to.
Nice.
And that really gave me a lot of grounding. That's when I really started understanding. That's where you begin to learn not to blame other people, because as addicts, it's everyone else's fault.
Yeah.
Or a thing's fault is that, so, and then as you learn what it is, then you can separate. And so that was one of the first times I did, aside from leaving my ex, that was one of the first steps to really reclaiming me.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. Like I said, it felt so good to not do it screaming or yelling. And it just felt good to say, this is the facts.
Yep.
And I'm taking care of me.
Yeah. And then you don't have anything to regret at that point. You don't have to feel guilty that you just slammed the door on someone or swore. Rah. You were authentically in your own space, taking care of your own needs. And there's nothing to regret with that, for sure. That's really, really great. Well, I want to talk about your organization, the First Nations Repatriation Institute. And in your book, you talk about the ceremonies that you create for adoptees and foster people. What do you call them? Former fostered individuals. Former fostered individuals, because they're not always youth. Is that why we take away the youth?
Yep.
Because sometimes it's called former foster youth, but they're like grown-ass adults. So formerly fostered individuals.
See, and that's interesting, because adoptees are kept perpetually young kids.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. Well, that's because nothing about this is healthy. So, of course, they're not going to have clear terms. But that's why we say formerly fostered individuals.
Yeah, I love that. But the ceremonies you create, and I especially love that you have a song that was created. And as I'm a musician, so that touched me deeply. And just using all the senses, I suppose that might just be in every ceremony that every Native American does. But I thought it was just beautiful the way you brought everyone together in a circle. And I just can't imagine what that must have felt like the first time you did that ceremony.
Well, I didn't create the song, nor did I create the ceremony. I witnessed something at my annual powwow where it made me wonder, why are we not welcoming our relatives back? I didn't do nothing with that. I didn't think I had, you know what I mean? It was a thought that came to me.
It was about veterans or something, right? Or people who died in war.
Yeah, it was a veteran special. And we have specials for all kinds of things. So, it'd been 10 years since I'd been home. I was a powwow dancer. I was in the color guard. I was a Native American student advisor. I was really involved and really, for the first time, felt free of everything that was heavy on my heart or my spirit. I was like, oh my God, this is life. This is unbelievable. I'll never forget, that was the year where it just felt amazing. And I wasn't in therapy. I didn't have resentments. I didn't have a thing following my head around, like with clouds of trauma. And it was just wonderful. And maybe that's why my brain and spirit was ready to question, wait a minute now, why would So I ended up sharing what I saw and what I was thinking when I was having breakfast with this elder. And I think the only reason that I would have shared that with him is he was so easy to talk to. He was just your kind, compassionate, incredible friend. And if you were wanting to learn something, he was an incredible teacher. So he just goes, did you go home in August? How was it? It's just conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I go, oh, it was great. Man, I was feeling good. And kind of even shared some of what I just shared with you, because he was also a counselor at one time. And,
Mm-hmm.
he just had all these years of experience of stuff. And I was like, yeah, I said, it was awesome. Pause for a little bit. And I go, but you know what? I was thinking of something. And it just came out of me. And as I started sharing with him in detail what I saw and what I thought, at one point I realized, oh my God, what am I saying? He is an elder, because I started talking fast. I started going like, and why isn't there a song? Now that I think about it, we got songs for everything. We make up songs for this. Anyway, at one point I'm like, holy shit, stop.
Because it should have been led by him. Is that what you're saying?
No, because I was thinking, he's an elder. He's a spiritual advisor. He was the spiritual advisor to the National Indian Child Welfare Association.
Uh-huh.
He was a healer. I mean, this man was like really renowned.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going, yeah, that's what it felt like. So I'm thinking, because I started thinking, well, if it was going to happen, it would have happened already, because he should know, because he already, that whole thing. And anyway, he just stopped, literally stopped, put his fork down, and he goes, you're right. This is what the Indian Child Welfare Act is about. The extended family, the healing. Yeah. He goes, yeah, you're right. There should be a song. I'll make sure there's a song. I'll ask Jerry Dearly to make a song. So that's how that came to be.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then he said to me, you had a vision. You better give me some tobacco. And I still did not know what was going to be, because this was an aspect of our culture that I was not completely aware of. I mean, I knew to give tobacco when I'm asking for something, but I didn't realize I was asking for anything, because I was just, you know what I mean? I'm just conversating in my mind. And he saw that as what it was needed to be.
Yeah.
Right. So he says to me, he says, well, bring this song out for the first time at World Peace and Prayer Day in the Black Hills. And then we'll talk about it at the conference, the National Indian Child Welfare Association conference. And I go, wait a minute. What's the Indian Child Welfare? I knew nothing. I did not know about it. Well, and he goes, well, you're going to have to educate yourself and find out what that. And he says, and it's going to be in Tucson. You need to get there.
Wow.
I'm like, so yeah. So I did the best I could I did get there. I asked my supervisor at work, I said, actually half of my students that come to see me have been in foster care or are adoptees. I need to learn more about what's going on, because I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, of course, you do need to go. But I don't have enough money in my budget to pay for this registration fee. So I call Chris and I say, well, I can go. They have money, but not for the fee. He goes, oh, no problem. You can volunteer. I'll tell them you need to volunteer to waive the fee. Okay. So that's how I even got there. Wow. And then that also got me to speak to the staff of this organization, of which now I'm like really close with and do a lot with. But anyway, so that's how it started. So there's a protocol, a cultural protocol, a spiritual protocol to a song, and how you bring it to the people the first time, all of that. And that's why I said, I didn't create nothing, but it's only because people don't understand the language or how that comes to be, I
have no idea.
Oh yeah, it had to all happen a certain way. And then he's the one who said, we need to, first he said a wiping of tears, which is a ceremony to address grief. And the reason he was thinking of it in that way was that there's so much grief and loss in adoption from being separated from family and culture. And so he's the one who really laid between, I would tell him things and then he would interpret that and go, oh, well, yes, of course, that's over. And that's how everything really did come to be as we see it today, is through my conversations with him and then him formulating it and making it, like even the name. I'd say, well, this is what it feels like's happening. And then he goes, well, yeah, that makes sense, because Wachochage, this is what we do. We pray for those yet to come. I mean, it just all fell together in a beautiful, beautiful way.
I was always wondering how to pronounce that word.
Oh, Wachochage. Well, Wachochage, and then Wablenicha is orphan.
Okay.
And the reason the word orphan was first used, like First Nations Orphan Association. I think I tell that story too in the book, but he said our traditional people, our language speakers, wouldn't understand what we mean because there isn't a word for adoptee.
Ah, got it.
And prior to all the white influx of massacres and disease, we never had a word for orphan either.
Oh, really?
Because there weren't any.
You just took care of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Not a word for orphan.
But that came later?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it came when we needed to have the word to describe. And then it was the opposite of white people in the history I'm reading, of children just being abused, neglected, and but anyway, so that came together with his leadership and him knowing what to do. And then it just grew over the years. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't think that I would be central in this because he's the guy, right? He's the spiritual. Why would I even think that it would be? I would just be on the side helping if possible.
But you have become the central person.
Well, me and Jerry's always there. I still feel like we counterbalance, but it's always me and Jerry because Chris passed 2011.
Yeah. But I think it's beautiful. I think an adoptee would need to lead that kind of thing.
That's what Jerry would say. You need to tell us and we'll help you.
The lived experience. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many of those ceremonies have you done now?
I don't know.
Dozens or
17 years of the powwow. So that, and then the other places we went, another 10.
Now, could other people go that are not in the tribe? Is that okay for people to attend?
Yeah.
I would love to witness one of those one time.
Anybody can come to a powwow, and people that want to participate in the ceremony don't have to be from, we're not on tribal land here in Minnesota when we'd have it in Minneapolis. But even if when we did it in Rosebud, if you're an adoptee, you're still an adoptee and you could still, come be part of that circle.
Oh, wow.
During the ceremony, for the ceremony.
If anyone would want to go to a powwow in general or to go to your ceremony, are there rules we should know? How do we not step in it?
Well, first and foremost, they're always open to the public. You don't come high or altered in any way. Mm-hmm. I don't know, just come and be gracious and listen to the MC. The MC will be telling you what's going on and just watch and try not to stare too much at one particular person, but you're going to want to because it's like, oh my God, but just be friendly. And as you were, if you were in any other gathering, just,
What else should we know about ICWA, Indian Child Welfare Act? What's going on with that? Is there anything we can be doing as the general public? What can we be doing to support?
Yeah, briefly, for those who don't know what ICWA is, it's the Indian Child Welfare Act passed in 1978. And it was passed because of the systematic removal of our children, that nearly 35% of our children were removed from our homes, our villages, our communities. Here in Minnesota, what that meant, 1 in every 4 Indian children were gone.
Oh, my God, that's horrible.
Yeah, it was awful. And so the act was passed to preserve families. Preserve families. And the act has stipulations in it that a child can only be, and we had to do this because the wording and stuff, because of the way children were taken. So it says in the language, can only be removed if there is imminent harm or danger.
Which you had neither of those.
Imminent harm or danger, not something you think is going to happen, something that's an actual risk. You can't do it. Well, mom might do this. Well, she might. That doesn't mean you should take the child away. How do we make the environment safe? How do we help mom or dad or mom and dad? And if there is imminent harm or danger, then the child should only be placed with other family members, other community members, Indians or any Native family. And the last is off the reservation with a non-Native family, but what they call ICWA approved.
Okay. They gone through some sort of class or vetted somehow.
It is really hard to enforce all that. And ICWA has not been always complied with, because even though it's a federal act,
Mhm.
no one gets in trouble for not following it.
Oh, really?
No judge has ever been sanctioned.
Shoot.
No lawyer has ever been sanctioned. Counties are just now, here in 2023, 2022, I guess is when it started auditing and saying, if this doesn't change, we'll take X number of dollars, will be gone. So they only
Really?
doing it out of motivation of dollars, not motivation to preserve families.
Or to help kids.
So that's why the
Dang.
act was passed. There's a thing in social work called a reasonable effort to help the family stay together.
Mhm.
We say there has to be active efforts.
Ah.
So you don't give mom a token necessarily or the number of a recovery program. You drive mom there, or you
Yeah.
drive dad there, which pisses social workers off.
Oh, they don't want to have to do that?
No, I want to always say, then why the hell are you a social worker?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you have to put the mouse down, leave the building. That's what an
Ah.
active effort is. And when you think about it, what a great time to make sure you connect and find out things you might not find out otherwise on a short car ride
Ah.
or, you know, and helping. And I've been training social workers since 2004. And every once in a while, I will still have a social worker, you know, raise their hand and say, you know, this active efforts thing, where does it end? I am not going to do more work than they are.
Oh, okay.
And I said, well, I guess two things. You know, so I went through some steps. Are you really doing more than they're doing?
Yeah.
And number two, if this makes you angry,
Mm-hmm.
then perhaps you're in the wrong position in child welfare.
Yeah.
You might be better off doing something else than doing this if you are angry and don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Because I said, trust me, this was well thought out.
Mm-hmm.
You're having a reaction. This one's about you, not about the family.
Yeah.
Because I try to create the picture that you are looking at a family in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
This is like coming up upon a deadly car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And people are bleeding, they're in shock,
Mm-hmm.
and the one in shock might be fighting you because they're in shock,
Mm-hmm.
or they might have just taken off running because they're in shock. There's all kinds of things. And I said, and the EMTs know well, this is another thing I don't understand about social work. They go in pairs or more.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we ask a social worker to go to a house by herself or himself.
Oh, yeah.
Why is that? There should be a support,
Yeah.
and two sets of eyes are always better than one.
Yeah.
And we're in crisis. So you should have more than one person.
Yeah.
And I said, so think about that when you go in. What's the first thing these EMTs do is they look and they, okay, do we need to stop bleeding? Do we need to wrap someone up? How do we get their heart rate regulated and their blood pressure down so that they're well enough to, we throw them in the thing and transport them? So I said, when you go into a family situation, what happens? Are you starting to judge them because you see the house doesn't look the way you think it should look? That's not helping. That doesn't lower anybody's heart rate. So that we're looking at it in a way that's a policing kind of attitude, not a healing kind of attitude. So as a trainer, educator, I keep trying to get workers to be looking at all families, but certainly our Native families, because I remind them that our families are reacting in an intergenerational trauma that they're not even aware of typically. So that's why I will just encourage workers, if you can't and don't want to wrap your head around that, then perhaps you shouldn't be a social worker. And maybe there's something else within the field that you can do where that's not going to be boiled up, because you're no help to anybody when you're like that.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And it feels like a lot of times the social workers or these people that are intervening just want to shame and punish and remove people. And as social workers, they should, I mean, in my dream world, want to preserve the family at whatever cost.
Yeah.
I mean,
for sure.
Because look at the major costs of taking away a family member. It's just so detrimental on our whole society and on children. So what can we do to solve these temporary crises to keep this family together?
Well, to put the children in foster care, they pay the foster parent.
Exactly.
And then the risk factor of a child being abused by their foster parent goes up.
Very high. Yeah.
And, that's not good. So, like I said, it's really backwards, and it is about policing families and judging families, and it's not about healing, which is really, really frustrating.
Yeah. Very frustrating. I agree. What can we do that are listening to this podcast? Pretend we're not social workers.
Yeah.
We're just regular people. What can we do to change these cultural mores around adoption and family preservation?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know. One of the things that I tell people is, who is your representative in your area? Call them and say, are you aware of what the Indian Child Welfare Act is? And they'll go, we ain't got no Indians around here. Indians are everywhere.
Everywhere. Yes.
There's a family in Georgia. There's a family in, Tennessee. There's a family, there's Indians everywhere.
Yeah.
You don't need to poo-poo it in that way and say, well, when it comes around in our district, I would like to make sure that you would support the Indian Child Welfare Act and anything in and around that. So in the event that ICWA is dismantled, there can be state ICWAs. So Minnesota has the Minnesota Indian Families Preservation Act.
Okay.
There's, I want to say 17. I don't know that I'm correct. There's a number of states that do have state ICWA laws.
Okay.
So that's helpful. I mean, and so get your people that are representing you, educate them and tell them that they need to be aware and that you want to be. That's huge.
Oh, that'd be great. That's something really practical that we all can do. And what can we do to support your organization or the things that you're doing? Your First Nations Repatriation Institute, or?
We are a 501, and should you want to donate money, that would be really wonderful. I have always wanted to get to a place where we had money to help individuals who didn't have money if they had to pay $400 to get records released, which makes me crazy.
400?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Catholic Social Services have been notorious for charging, and Children's Home Society.
To get their birth records is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So talk about insanity in adoption. I think it was Children's Home Society. This one adoptee had called. He wanted to get his records, and they were in a sealed state yet here in Minnesota, which is absolutely freaking ridiculous.
Yeah, it's terrible. That needs to change.
So you need to tell your representatives that too. The adoption laws are wanky.
Yeah.
Why does our state think the closed records, blah, 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 just whatever you want to say in that venue. Anyway, so he was saying, I want to get my, and she says, well, I can't give them to you, because your mother signed a, whatever. And we all know that those mothers, that was in duress. Most of them had no idea what they were really signing. Yeah. They signed it. Plus they're 19 and scared, 17 and scared, 21 and scared. They don't know.
Just had given birth.
And things could have changed, or they didn't even give birth, signed before they even gave birth.
Oh, yes.
So, yes. So anyway, so here's the insidiousness of adoption today. That person in that building on the phone with just a regular old staff person says to the adoptee, well, I'm looking at your records right now and blah, 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 and tells him nothing.
That is so horrible.
If that doesn't make us crazy, we've lost our sense of humanity.
They got it right there. Oh, that's just.
I just want to cuss. I just want to say,
You can cuss here. I don't care.
It's like, so it's just insidious. And in that situation, I found his mother.
Okay.
And she's no longer with us, but she didn't remember signing that.
Oh, no kidding.
A lot of them don't. I mean, they're just, it's a time of deep duress.
Wow.
But anyway, so adoption today, I know that adoptive parents may love their children, but you have to love your children more than you love your idea of what you think things should be, and if I had my fantasy, tomorrow morning, we would stop all adoptions, period. And we would make sure all the adoptees that want to know who their or where they're from, who they are, that they would find out, and that we would have a time, several years of great healing before we opened that door. And only adoptees and birth mothers should write the policies.
Oh, I love that. What about fostering? Would you take foster care away too?
Yeah, we don't need foster care.
Just families should take care of each other.
Yep. And they'll say, but what if we can't find family? Okay, you also have to remember, I'm thinking about Indian people too.
Okay.
Mostly Indian people. I mean, I forget to think outside that there's other folks, but there's just always family. But why does it have to be that the kid is actually removed? I mean, okay, so if there's physical abuse going on, yes, or something else going on, that's imminent harm. I mean, that's danger, right? If physical abuse and that, but there's always family somewhere, always. And then how do you support that family? Right now, I mean, even today, they just drop kids into the foster family and that's it. I mean, I listened to a foster youth 3 years ago on a panel, and she is just maybe 25-ish, if that. So aged out. And she, at the last foster home she was at, she couldn't sit at the dinner table and eat with the family.
Oh, that's horrible.
Oh, it's like,
fostering is so fraught with all sorts of problems.
Nobody checks. Nobody goes back in and check anything.
And they're the ones getting the money.
And even if it's an open adoption, it's rarely enforceable.
Yeah. See these birth mothers sign thinking, okay, it's okay because I'll see them and it'll be open. And then the door gets slammed shut and they lose track of their own kid. And it's so terrible. I've really become a family preservationist. I really, really, I wish there was this dream world that you and I would like to create where we can just end it. But unfortunately, I think it's going to take a long time. But I don't know. I plan to just keep chipping away at it, and at least
me too,
helping people understand what's wrong with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's money involved. I mean, that's a large portion of it. There's a lot of money in adoption. We are a high commodity.
Yep. Follow the money. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. It's terrible. Well, what if people are listening and they're Native themselves, or they know somebody that is an adopted person that's Native American? Can they call you and you can help them find their family?
I think you can go to the website, wearecominghome.org, and then an email will get to me.
Okay. Wearecominghome.org is your main website where you want people to go. Well, I will send people there. You are just doing amazing work in this space, and I admire you so much.
Oh, well, thank you.
I want to support you in any way I can. Is there anything else you'd like to say that I haven't asked you about or we haven't gotten to yet?
I really appreciate that you, as an adoptive mother, are understanding these complexities and are seeing that. That says a lot. It says that I don't see a whole lot of that. I see more defensiveness and but, and you're not there. And so I just really appreciate that. And it gives me hope that we have allies and that we can, at some point, maybe there'll be a way we all come together to support good, healthy change in adoption. But I would tell people to read The Baby Thief because that's the foundation of adoption. That's why it's crazy today. One woman had that strong of an impact on.
Whoa.
Yeah. Read it. The Baby Thief. Then there's another book called Baby Catchers.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was a good one too, to understand that that's what's there. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I get nervous around adoptive parents because I know that there's defensiveness because they want, but I love my child. Yeah. And well, we don't know how healthy your love is yet.
Yeah.
Because we're all trying to figure out how to do it, all of us.
Yeah.
And all it takes is to look at yourself over and over and over. Why are you here in this position? Because most adoptive situations seem to be a child fulfilling a need of the parent. And that is where it begins to just go all downhill after that.
Yeah. The people that say, oh, but adoption, it takes care of these children. No, that's not why I adopted. I adopted because I was infertile and I wanted a family. That is not a good reason.
It isn't.
That's not the reason.
In fact, maybe that's what I'll title my paper. I've got to write something. First time I said it out loud this last summer was, I am not the answer to your infertility.
Absolutely.
No one is responsible for that. I wish it didn't happen. I can't imagine what it feels like and how painful it is, and probably a pain that would never go away, but something you would have to learn to walk in an acceptance with. Yeah. But to put it on a child is really selfish and toxic. I mean, it gets all mixed up after that, and people don't realize that it's an unresolved grief that then the child's made responsible for.
Yeah. And I'm working on that grief now, 20 years later. But boy, would it have made a difference if I had worked on it then? Even if I had still adopted, I wouldn't have been carrying around that unresolved grief just, like a cloud over my head, like you were saying before. Well, there's just so much that we need to learn. But like you said, that one woman that created this whole adoption paradigm.
Georgia Tan.
So we're two women, we can do the opposite, right?
Exactly.
We'll all just do our part and do what we can to make it a safer place for everybody, especially our adoptees. So,
and our birth mothers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They are in so much pain too. Thank you, Sandy, for all you're doing. I will continue following your work, and I hope everybody else does too. If you want to find Unraveling Adoption, everyone listening, go ahead and find us at unravelingadoption.com. I do have a group of adoptive parents that are on board with me. So Sandy, there's a lot of us out there. I've got like 82 people in this group right now. Yay. And we are all just wanting to learn. I am no expert in anything except my own story, but I bring in experts, and we're reading books, and we are studying and trying to learn. So if you want to join that, if you're an adoptive or foster parent, find my information at unravelingadoption.com. And last but not least, I want to give a big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. These people donate monthly through Patreon, and it helps us cover costs such as recording software, MailChimp, Canva, website, things like that. And I really appreciate all their help. We have a new Patreon supporter this week. Adair Small has joined the team. Thank you so much, Adair. And I want to just give a shout out just to first names of all of the Patreon supporters we currently have. Angela, Autumn, Barbara and Steve, Camille, Catherine, Darcy, Kim, Elsie, Lisa, Mar, Nina, Rachel, Renee, Rika, Sue, Susan, and Wendy. You guys are all amazing. Thank you so much for all of your support. And if any of you would like to join us, go find out how at patreon.com/unravelingadoption. All right. Well, thank you again, Sandy. I so appreciate you. And I'm so glad to know you.
Thank you. I'm excited about just even the name you put here, Unraveling Adoption. Is exactly what need to do.
Yep.
So
Thank
you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Sandy and I want you all to stay
safe.